Well, good evening, everyone. Night special parent.
We don't even really want other people to have them. But it would be better if it wasn't our own children. It'd be easier to take in for sure, right? There is a normal and natural amount of anxiety and depression that we experience on a daily basis. So that's not what we're going to talk about today, right? We all experience some level of anxiety, some level of depression, some level of things just not going our way. And it wouldn't be me if we didn't talk about some of my football fans. Now, this moment caused me anxiety and depression. So if you're not a football fan, you probably still even know about this, right? Yeah, it caused me some, and I'm almost over it. Oh, okay, so my friends in the room are like, no, you're not even close. But this is a normal anxiety, right? I can have a day, I can love what I'm doing, I enjoy watching the game. I spent 3 solid hours, 3.5 hours, nail-biting, anxious, concerned, texting with my friends and family and colleagues. And then I got to the fourth quarter and I got to express depression and sadness, fear, and emotions we shouldn't talk about in public, right? But at the end of the day, I get over it. I wake up in the morning and maybe still a little annoyed, but I get to go on with my life. I'm not broken by it completely. Just back. But, I mean, it's still new, right? This is all, we're still early. So anyway, this is a normal experience, right? We as grown-ups experience this is totally normal. That also is not what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about a normal, natural level of anxiety and depression. There's a test coming up. I'm sad because this thing happened. That's not what we're talking about tonight, okay? So I don't want us to get confused. As I was preparing and praying about our time together, yesterday we had the day off. We worked to help with some of that other stuff, and rest. We got to reflect on the life and works of an amazing and influential man, Martin Luther King Jr. One of the many things that Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, many of the things he wrote or said were memorialized yesterday in many ways. But one that really resonated with me in light of tonight's conversation was this one. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. That's profound. Let's kind of let sink for just a second. These words are so true and a great reminder to all of us that only light and love can drive out the darkness and hate and sin in our lives. Right? Jesus Christ is that light. He is that love. Through him, we can do all things. We know that. Scripture tells us that, right? One of the most commonly shared scriptures, we can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's true. God tells us so. Jesus tells us so. This is his truth. So these struggles we're about to talk about are also his. He has provided a way through it for us, okay? It's hard, it's ugly. We're going to get to the happy ending on the other side a little bit in terms of his truth. But in the middle, there's just some icky stuff that we got to deal with. We as a culture and a community, a Christian community, share these great quotes all the time. Hope-filled scriptures, we post them on social media, your Insta page, your Facebook page, your Snap page, although Snap doesn't have a page, your Snap stories, may have all kinds of great uplifting things to say every single day, and that's great. I do the same thing. I post every single day from Jesus Calling a post, and what I love about Jesus Calling is that it always talks about the realness of what we're dealing with in the world. I love how this author says some of these things. Strive to trust me in more and more areas of your life. Anything that tends to make you anxious is a growth opportunity. Instead of running away from these challenges, embrace them, eager to gain the blessings I have hidden in the difficulties. If you believe that I am sovereign in every aspect of your life, it is possible to trust me in all situations. Don't waste energy regarding or regretting the way things are or thinking about what might have been. Start at the present moment, accepting things exactly as they are, and search for my way in the midst of these circumstances. Trust is like a staff that you can lean on. As you journey uphill with me, if you are trusting in me consistently, the staff will bear much of your weight as needed. Lean on, trust, and be confident in me with all your heart and mind. I thought that was pretty interesting that was today's devotion as we're going to talk about anxiety. So we do this for a lot of reasons, right? We fill our heart, we fill our mind with all of the right thoughts. And we're grown-ups, and we're making those great intentional decisions, things that we do, right? Scripture also tells us that there will be trouble. John 16:13 says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have troubles, or suffering, depending on the version that you're reading. You will have troubles in this world. Be courageous. I have conquered the world. James tells us to consider it joy when we experience various trials, knowing that the testing of our faith produces endurance. We've all read that. The book of James is one of those that just gets me every single time, all the things I'm supposed to be getting and knowing. I know that I'm not alone in this room. I'm looking around when I say that there are no truer words ever spoken when it comes to raising children. There is no greater joy, right? Anybody done anything greater than raising children? And no greater test of our faith. And it certainly requires endurance. And I only have one. So for y'all that have got more than that, praise be to you. Parenting is not for the weak, okay? It takes strong parents. And you guys are all here tonight as a testimony to your strength and your faith in raising your children. So kudos to you guys. I know it's not easy to come out on a school night and spend a couple of hours listening to me, so I'm going to try to make it as exciting as I can. Tonight we're going to begin to take a look at a few of the things that our children are facing, and sadly, the lifelong or life-ending results of those things. So we're looking at it and kind of like what we do here at ALCS, everything that we do, we step back and we ask why. Why are we doing this? Why do we use this textbook? Why are we having this class? Why do we do this? Why? So why are we talking about mental health issues, depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicide on a campus where we have 2.5-year-olds to 8th grade? Right? One of my 8th graders and I have this common thing when things are just going on, and sometimes we just don't have words. We're like, it's just, and it's kind of our thing, it's just, right? It's simple. These are the ages where these mental and emotional and physical disorders begin. Teenagers and grown-ups don't just wake up one morning and find themselves anxious or depressed. They were fine yesterday, they just woke up with a disorder. That's not how that works. According to Mind Child Institute and Anxiety of Depression, according to the Mind Child Institute and the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, of the 74.5 million children in the United States, an estimated 17.1 million have or are currently suffering from one of the mental illnesses listed above. More than the number of children with cancer, diabetes, and AIDS combined. of all mental health disorders or illnesses occur before the age of 14. That's every one of those children that we talked about. 2.5 to 14. These illnesses or these anxieties happen before that time. That's why we're talking about them today. 75% of the total number occur by the age of 24. In spite of the magnitude of the problem and the lack of awareness and our stigma keep the majority of these young people from getting help. No one wants to address that their child has a problem or that there's a problem in our family. It's super hard. It takes humility. It takes courage. And for so many families, it just doesn't happen. The Child Mind Institute says that this is a public health crisis that must be addressed. It has been said that these mental health issues are growing in epidemic proportions. When I read that, I thought, wow, epidemic proportions. That sounds like a movie, right? The CDC needs to get involved or something. Like, this is a big deal, epidemic proportions. Epidemic is defined as a widespread occurrence of an infectious disease in a community at a particular time. I know that I know that I know that I know. If we were talking about the flu, we would be all sitting up straight and tall. We're ready to have this conversation. We will do anything to keep that flu out of our house. Is this true? Can I get an amen on that? Yeah. We wear antibacterial gel on our keys so that we have germ juice. We wipe our grocery carts at the grocery store before we go into the store because we don't want the flu. We will do anything to avoid it. No one is inviting the flu. Hey, flu, come on over. Come join my house. We got nothing to do for the next 7 days if you've got multiple children. That's all it's going to take to cycle through, right? When that doesn't work and we do end up with the dreaded flu, and we do, and if those of you with multiple children, you end up with the flu, and then the flu, and then the flu again, and then lo and behold, the first child comes back with the flu again, right? That's how it works, understand, again. We do everything that we can to let our child know just how much we love them and how sorry we are that they feel so puny and icky. It's the only time we're happy to clean up vomit on the floor. It's the only time that we're, and I'm not sure that we're entirely happy, but we do it because we love our child, right? Also because we really reciprocated. But we do everything. We put ourselves at risk. Never one time do you see a mom or a dad say, oof, that's rough, you're quarantined. Check back with me in 7 days. Good luck, I'll send your food through the door. Or maybe you do, in which case I just need your protocol. It doesn't happen in my house that way. Instead, we do that parenting thing. We cuddle up with them on the couch. We rub their head. We love on them. We kiss them. We watch cartoons that we would normally rather gouge our eyes out than have to watch. But we watch them and we love them because we're so happy to be caring for our child when they need us. We'll risk everything. And by everything, that's that dreaded flu. Because you know it's coming to you, right? And you don't get a day off, and no one's cuddling you and washing, that's not happening. But we risk it all in the name of the love for our child. So my question to you guys tonight is, what risks will you take to be with your child in the face of this mental health epidemic? What courage will you face? How will you be humble in your communities to address this epidemic? That's tough. How did we get here? How did this become an epidemic? It's just when we were talking, Dr. Nichols talked to us about this growing percentage. It was 3%, now it's 10%. And there's no slow for this mindset. Why? What's happening? Well, some of us who really love to spend a ton of time in Genesis will tell you this has been coming for quite some time, but I don't take us all the way back there. We only have a little bit of time, and we need to get through some stuff. But our children are facing things that you and I in this room never imagined possible when we were their age. We're going to touch on some of those things in a little bit, but remember, when we're talking about the things that our children are experiencing, and there's another slide later on, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but we say these words, I completely understand, I know exactly how you're feeling. And the truth of the matter is, we absolutely 100% don't. Because we've never been in their position. It is our job to learn and to listen. So that'll save you a little bit on the other side. We're going to talk about that. Clinical depression and anxiety disorders go far beyond the blues. So we all, again, feel blue and sad when things happen. Severe and clinical depression is a long-standing distortion in mood that doesn't match our circumstances. So it's kind of a little metric there, right? Everything is perfect, everything is wonderful, your kid is doing everything that they absolutely love. It's their favorite things, all their friends are over, and they are periodically. I have a teenage daughter, so she could have everything going exactly right, and at the flip of a switch, the entire world is different. And I'm left thinking, what just happened? A little bit like that football game. I'm clearly not over it. I will get over it before we're done tonight, I promise. Anxiety disorders are the most commonly diagnosed mental illnesses in the United States. More than 18% of our population every year is diagnosed with major depression, and they carry the heaviest burden. The depression burden is greater than the anxiety burden, but anxiety and depression go hand in hand so many times, right? Fewer than 1/3 of those suffering from very serious mental conditions ever receive treatment, despite the huge potential for treatment success. Everything that we're talking about here tonight is treatable. It is slow, it is painful, it is not quick, it is not easy, but it is treatable. Okay? There are two, if you ask me, two huge components to the treatment plan. Jesus and you all in this room right now, the parents. Anxiety disorders are among the most common. We've talked a little bit about that, with a little bit with depression. Anxiety is a part of the body, it is the part of the body's natural reaction to stress. Right? So we're a little bit stressed out. It's a good thing that it causes us to wake up and pay attention and stay alert. That part is okay, right? But what we're talking about is an anxiety that is a feeling of nervousness and unease, a worry that typically again, exceeds normal circumstance. So what's normal, or what's typical, is super, super heightened for a person suffering from anxiety. Anxiety disorders and normal feelings of anxiousness are two different things. When the fear gets in, that the nervousness becomes excessive and difficult to control, and it interferes with our daily life. I'm sure everyone in this room has seen or met somebody who struggles from just even being able to do the simplest things because their fear, this anxiety that something will happen, prevents them from moving forward. Let's see if we can take a little bit closer look and see how this feels. Everyone in here has a child. Almost everyone in here has a child. One outlier. Let's see if we can imagine. So think about a time, kind of close your eyes. It's like we do this with kids, but close your eyes. And imagine a time where you were with your child, let's say age 3 to 7. Maybe you're in an amusement park, you've just gotten off your favorite ride. Everyone's excited, planning for the next ride. We know the chaos that ensues. There's 57 people on the same ride. They all come off all at the same time. Your kid's so excited, jumping up and down. You turn around to grab the stroller or grab the other kid, and your kid's gone. Just gone. What are you feeling? That second that you feel that, are you feeling panic? Is your heart beating like at a pace that you think is seriously going to max out at the gym? Are you way over normal limit? Are you short of breath? Are you suddenly hot or suddenly cold? Does everything seem to be moving in slow motion? Or is it going so fast that you can't catch up? Then you blink, and your child is right there and okay. For somebody suffering from anxiety, there's no blink. They live every day in that moment of pure anxiety. Have any of us ever lost our child at the mall? Yeah, right? I lost my nephew at Disneyland. He's grown, we found him, it's all good. He got to go home with us, it was really great. But in that exact moment, there is nothing worse. For those of you that can tap into that, there's nothing worse, right? Then suddenly we're mad at the kid, right? That's the next normal thing. Where'd you go? For somebody suffering from anxiety, that's what it feels like every day. That's what it could feel like to get out of bed. That's what it could feel like to go to school. That's the sheer weight of the anxiety that we're talking about, okay? So getting away from the just I'm nervous, I have a test today, or whatever. What does anxiety look like in our children? How do we notice? It's super hard to really identify anxiety in our children because they're little. So it's been a common problem to try to figure it out. They're oftentimes diagnosed with ADHD, right? They can't sit still. There's a bunch of this kind of stuff going on. Those go hand in hand. A lot of these behavior things start to look similar. But there are some signs and symptoms of children and anxiety that you could probably tap into. This is just a small list, but agitation, restlessness, and inattention to details, poor focus. They literally have symptoms for headaches and stomach aches. They do have a headache. They do have a stomach ache. Children who are super anxious do feel like they're going to throw up at any given moment. Even though all of our logic tells us you haven't eaten anything in 10 hours, there's no possible chance, you only had a sip of water, go to school, you're perfectly fine. They do have a stomach ache. This is a legitimate thing. Avoidance, tantrums, crying, refusing to go to school. And that's not just on Mondays, because some of us teachers struggle from that one too. Meltdowns before school over little things like clothing, hair, shoes, socks. And again, we're talking about an extreme situation where it becomes debilitating. The child literally can't figure out how to get themselves out the door. You've yelled every single thing you know how to yell. You've enticed every single way you know how to entice. This is just a problem. It is super, super difficult. Here's where this gets difficult, Mom and Dad. Our first reaction is just let them stay home, because that's super easy on us. What we have to do is figure out a way to help them overcome their anxieties, and our avoidance, our unwillingness to deal with the fears and challenges that they have will not help them. That's hard, because it is way easier to just let them stay home, to just not have to take that test today, to just not have to face the problems. Now, I'm not saying throwing them full out into the lion's den, but developing strategies, getting them help, having the conversations with the medical practitioner to help you get this to happen. But to just decide we're going to avoid all child's anxieties by just doing 100% what the child wants to do does not produce healthy, functioning grown-ups. Okay? We are currently in a society where it's much easier to just let the child decide. Society is telling us, by the way, that that's good. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, about how we get to just choose all things. Just make them happy. Well, that works for a little bit. But we have to help children understand how to overcome these things in a healthy, functional way, right? Professionals can help you do that. Just, again, in a classroom setting, talking with your teachers, those kinds of things. But we're talking about like literally helping them get out of bed and get to the next place. Avoidance for us is not the answer, okay? They may have some behavior things that we look at. Depression has some of them that are really similar. Depression is one of the most common, common, but depression can happen at any age. Depression is a little bit easier to see in our children than just that anxiety, because it has more of a downward focus, right? Anxiety can just look like they're hyper, that they just don't like things, and they're just a little flippant with the things that they're doing. And again, we do get sad. We're talking about chronic moods that are elevated to unreasonable proportions, okay? Current research suggests that depression can be caused by a combination of genetic, biological, environmental, and psychological factors. We see a different child in the depressed child. We see two different kinds of changes. We see emotional changes. You guys can read those, where they're just feeling sad or hopeless. They just feel that they're worthless, that they have no value. Particularly when we're looking at teenagers, we see an uptick in this type of language. They're able to now say, I'm not valuable, I'm not worthy, I have very low self-esteem, okay? In the younger ages, we may just see them having trouble concentrating or making decisions or remembering things. The one that really concerns me, or many of them, but the one that's pretty big there is the ongoing sense that life and the future are grim and bleak. It will never get any better. So we ask our kids, how was your day? It was a day. The next day, how was your day? Right? We've all had that conversation. Our job is to have deeper conversations with those children so that they can start to express that stuff and not be the parent that says, I want to give them all their privacy in the world. Go ahead and just keep telling me it was a day and lock yourself in your bedroom. Okay? Locking yourself in your bedroom all the time, while maybe fun for the teenager, is not necessarily helpful in determining whether or not they're struggling. If they won't talk to you, if they are completely withdrawn, we need to be having a conversation. You need to be having a conversation with them. Frequent thoughts of death, dying, or suicide. What's interesting here is that if we're not having a conversation with our children about this, they may not express this to you. You may not necessarily be seeing that. You have to be having conversations with them. Okay? We see some behavioral changes as well. Those were the emotional ones. These are behavior changes. Your child may appear tired and have a complete loss of energy. Another one that's a really big deal for teenagers is insomnia or sleeping too much. Teenagers actually sleep a lot. If you have a teenager that is not sleeping, there's something else happening. You need to be having that conversation. Get them to their pediatrician, have a conversation. Or if they're sleeping just incessantly, they just never stop sleeping. They just can't physically get out of bed. Sleep is a great indicator. Changes in appetite. We particularly see this with girls. They're trying to modify their body image and they're using appetite to do this. They're actually deciding that they're just not hungry. They've done this for a period of time and they literally are no longer hungry. They can control themselves. I wish I could do that. I keep trying, I read every diet, I know everything. I just decide I just want to be hungry and it just doesn't work out. But somehow our teenage girls have figured that out. Boys suffer from this as well. It's just not as common. Social isolation. If your children are not wanting to do anything with their friends, they have no friends at all in the world according to them. Right? Also, the mom of a teenager, she says, I have absolutely no friends. Then why does your phone not stop blinging? Are those your non-friends texting you? I don't understand. But for kids, it's pretty, everything is amplified to some degree. Angry outbursts. If you've noticed any kind of self-harm, we'll talk a little bit more about that. If they're just not able to have a normal conversation with you. I have Jaden's permission to share this with you. Jaden struggles with some anxiety issues. She doesn't have depression, but she does struggle with anxiety. And we have seen this manifested in her in different ways as she has grown up. But one of the things that I noticed at a very, very early age was her wringing of her hands. You know, you used to see that in your grandma used to do that. You'd think your grandma wringed her hands and just constant. Jaden still will do this, but not so much. But she would wring her hands as a young child. I'm talking like 3 and 4 years old, until the tops of her hands would literally bleed. She'd just wring them over and over and over and over and over again. We asked the doctor about it, and he said, I don't know, that's weird. As we went further on, as she was little, it was about the time that she was 6 and 7, we were able to see, where some of these pieces were put together. And that's one of her coping mechanisms. So she wrings her hands until they bleed. Now she has learned how to recognize that that's happening, what can she do, and she's learned some strategies so that those things don't happen. She still struggles. She still has some things that she has to deal with, but she is learning strategies to deal with each of those things as they come up. For us, that's been critical. One of the things that happens with her is, when she's in a thing, if we change her body temperature. So this isn't true of every child, but it works really well for her. If you put her in a cool bath or a hot shower, or literally if she eats something really cool, I can get her to eat ice cream super easy. Telling a child to go drink a cool glass of water because it's going to change their core temperature and they're going to feel better really isn't, she's not super happy about that. She doesn't care. Go get some ice cream, have a couple bites. And literally changing her core temperature works for her. This was one of the things that one of her therapists recommended, and we found that it has really, really worked. We're blessed to be able to have a hot tub. I can put her in the hot tub, changes her core temperature, changes her mood, we can have a conversation. But again, we've been working on this since she was very, very little. So developing strategies, not avoidance, will definitely go a long way, right? So we've been fortunate that we have had an ongoing conversation, and she hasn't struggled with too many things that have been life-threatening and that kind of nature. As we look at this self-harm, for example, how many of you are aware of what self-harm really is and how it's being practiced in the United States? Yeah, a fair amount. Yeah. So for those of us who don't or didn't have a great understanding, cutting is a practice that's foreign and frightening to us as parents. It is not a suicide attempt. I think that's an important distinction. Though many may look at it that way, cutting is a form of self-injury. The person is literally making small cuts in his or her body, usually in their arms or legs, so it's difficult for people to see. They can hide pretty easily. And it's difficult for us to understand. But kids are using this to control their emotional pain. It doesn't make sense to us. The practice has gone on for a long time. But many experts, Karen Canatero, the author of a book called Bodily Harm, she's a PhD, and she says that her patients seem to be getting younger and younger. The self-harm typically started at about age 14, but in recent years she started to see children as young as 11 and 12. Part of this, they're saying, is because children have access to the information through other mediums. So they're learning about this from other students in their class, other kids on the football field, kids in their Awana group, different things like that, not to mention social media, right? We want to be careful not to always paint social media as the evil of all things. It certainly does propel student knowledge of things. But self-injury is defined as a coping mechanism for unhappy kids. Super hard to imagine. I can't begin to imagine how that could be helpful. But in these children, it does. They feel like there is some control over their pain. If they're inflicting the pain themselves, they're in control, and the circumstances are not. Okay? Many kids who self-injure are simply regular kids going through adolescent struggles for self-identity. They're experimenting, one person says, although this particular counselor says, hate to call it a phase because I don't want to minimize the kind of kids that start doing this because of the severe emotional problem that's attached to it. Because they're looking for anything, they're not talking to their parents, they're not talking to a therapist, they're just choosing. And some professionals are saying that the effect for them is the same as somebody using cocaine. I personally have no knowledge in any of this. This is just what the research shows. But that it somehow releases the same endorphins. And remember, when we're not happy, it's the low endorphins, right? The serotonin, the endorphins aren't kicking in, and so we need to figure out something to do that. These children have determined that this works. Self-harm can start from anything. And for children, they see that as a very minimal low risk because it's just a light scratch on the edge of their arm or something that no one can see. So they're not necessarily thinking it's a huge big deal. I don't need to talk to anybody about that. I'm just fine, right? That's bad. But the worst of this is the permanent end to our children's depression and sadness. Sick of crying, tired of trying. Yeah, I'm smiling, but I'm dying on the inside. It's difficult for us to understand what would motivate a young person to take his or her life. Changes in behavior of a child, often seen as a phase they may be going through, or just a part of adolescence. Well, that's a risk too great to take. That we say our kids are just going through this phase, that they don't really know what's going on with them. We need to be aware that suicide is the silent epidemic of our youth, and that suicide is preventable. Suicide is currently the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24. According, that was in 2016 from CDC. We've already, as a community, our very own small community here, Rancho Cucamonga, have experienced this in this school year alone. I know we talked about it in our last session a little bit. 3 teenagers and 1 11-year-old child killed themselves in August. All 4 deaths this year in our community were linked to anxiety and depression. More teenagers and young adults die from suicide than from cancer, heart disease, AIDS, birth defects, stroke, pneumonia, influenza, and chronic lung disease combined. Dr. Nichols already talked about that there are 129 deaths, suicides every single day, 3.1 million suicides a year. 4 out of 5 teens who attempt suicide have given clear warning signs, many of which we've already talked about here tonight. Some are not as easy. We're going to show a quick video of one mom sharing her struggle.
Action News, always taking action for you.
Signs of suicide. Tonight, a mom is coping with the loss of her teenage son who took his own life.
Oh, this is a sad story that happens far too often. Help is there, but troubled kids don't always know how and when to ask for help.
Now, 7 Action News reporter Jim Kurtzner with the story every parent and every teen needs to see.
We picked this peaceful place to talk with this still grieving mother. She's finding her peace now by trying to help others.
Right away I knew there was something wrong, and because Brandon always calls me if he's going anywhere.
This is her son, Brandon. He was 15 and a student at Howell High School when he took his own life just 3 weeks ago.
Just the Saturday before, we were talking about how much fun he had over the summer.
Wow.
He was talking about his Christmas list.
Brandon had another side filled with depression. He didn't express it except here on his Twitter page, discovered by his family only after it was too late. If life doesn't break you today, don't worry. It will try again tomorrow. Life is hard, then you die. Brandon's mom regrets missing these cries for help. Like many parents, she didn't know about Twitter and Instagram.
Had we known about it, we definitely would have known that something was wrong.
Another post from Brandon: I hate mornings, I hate school, I hate being tired. Bullying may be a factor in this tragedy, but it's not an excuse.
I don't blame the bullying. In fact, right now, I don't really blame anyone. It's really hard on me. I blame myself for not knowing that my own child was so tormented.
Brandon's mom says her darkest day was her son's last day. She found him in his own bedroom. She would rather not say how he did it.
I still can't get the vision out of my head of the poor baby. You know, it's just, no parent should ever have to go through that.
Students at Howell High School are making suicide prevention their cause in Brandon's name. The lessons here are universal. Jim Kurtzner, 7 Action News.
I know that when our children want their privacy and they don't want us to look at their devices and they don't want us to have access to their social media, we feel like voyeurs, or we feel like we're doing something wrong. We feel like we're not giving them their human rights, right? But my child's life is more important than her right to privacy at this point. She's 14. I want to make sure that I'm paying attention. Mom and Dad, you guys are the only ones, the absolute 100% only people to make the difference in their life. You have access to them, you have access to their information, you have a daily dialogue with them available so that these things don't catch you off guard. So this mom isn't just she never even knew it happened. Right? I don't want that for any of us, obviously. We have to put our desire for our kids to be happy with us at every cost aside so that we're there and available to do the job God's called us to do. He tasked us with raising these children. That means not necessarily giving them everything they want, like their privacy. So we want to know, what causes all of this? It's hard to know. There are so many different ideas. Sometimes the problem can be chased to one factor, but it's usually a combination of psychological and experiential, chemical problems. There can be a chemical problem in the brain chemistry. Neurotransmitters are naturally occurring in brain chemicals that carry signals to other parts of our brain and our body. When there's something, a misfire there, there's something misfire there. It's easy for us to say we don't want to pay attention to that. There's nothing wrong with my child. But if they had the flu or they have a cold, you will take them to the doctor and get medication to fix them. I'm not advocating that every child gets medicated. I'm advocating if your child is struggling, go get it looked at. Hormones can be a thing. Oh my goodness, all of us that are parents of teenagers or have already had teenagers can attest to hormones certainly change things. Inherited traits, depression can be and is very common in blood relatives. So if you've got depression in your family line, it's very possible that that's part of the leading cause there, or a cause. Early childhood trauma can be a cause. Learned patterns of negative thinking. And that part just really links to me. There's nothing we can do about brain chemistry. There is, as parents, something that we can do about learned patterns of negative thinking, allowing a child to continue to say negative things about themselves, about just being negative in the world, about every single little thing, rather than learning to feel capable of finding solutions to the challenges that they have, just living in that self-wall over there. There are a lot of risk factors that can kind of go into this, having certain personality traits, abusing alcohol. So for our older kids, I'm hoping that none of them do that, but that would be the case. Family history, having a parent or grandparent with a depression or bipolar disorder, a family member who died by suicide, having a dysfunctional family and family conflict, experiencing recent stressful events in their life. Stanford Children's Hospital says that most mood disorders in children and adolescents, it says one of the most underdiagnosed medical health problems, and if left untreated, depression and anxiety disorders severely influence the person's development, their ability to achieve success in education, in the hope of fulfilling their purpose in life, and being productive. They just get so isolated. They get stuck in the sadness, the grief, the fear, the worry, and the loneliness. Those are all real true emotions. We all feel those, right? At some point, we all feel those emotions. Teens and healthcare professionals refer to those as triggers. These are all these isolated little things, all bunched up together. Our normal everyday feelings that can be overwhelming, to say the least, properly explored, become these huge, overwhelming emotions for our children, and we see it with them crying and raging, refusing to eat, not sleeping, and not talking. Going back to all of these things, they just don't talk. I have to just think that when Jesus talks about the world having troubles, this is it. I feel like this is it. How are we responding to those feelings? What are we doing? So much of the time when the kid says, I've got all these problems, I'm doing all these things, we tell them, like Doc Holliday said, there's no normal life, it's just life, get on with it, right? Have we all told our kids, that's normal, it's okay, just move on. I know I have. That's a normal feeling. My hair's not working, I can't do this. I know that's normal, get in the car, it's okay. Just, can we go? I would agree in many situations that things are normal, but what these kids are feeling is not normal in the least. And again, it's because we don't understand. Our idea of what is normal is very, very different than theirs. We didn't grow up with Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat. We didn't grow up with some of the social pressures to be perfect. We all had, I'm sure, all of us in this room had a desire to be liked in our classrooms and in our different settings. But we didn't have the pressures of the whole world, and they believe that the whole world is looking at them. This new idea that you walk into a store and everybody in the store is looking at that one child, that one decision that that child's going to make. Should she or should she not buy that blouse? Should he or should he not get that skateboard? They literally are so obsessed. They Snapchat their friends to determine whether or not it's something they should buy. We take pictures in the dressing room to decide whether or not we can get 5 friends to agree with us that this is something we should buy or not buy. We need approval from so many places. When our child tells us that they're having a problem that we can't possibly understand, and we say things like, that's perfectly normal, or I completely understand, we're kind of lying to them. Because we can't, right? We can't understand what their experience is. We have to listen. We have to invest in the time that it takes to hear them out. And I know it is painful. Sometimes the story can go on forever, and you never get to the point. I was looking at some of the videos to share and show about these different things. One of the videos I looked at was pretty lengthy and wasn't 100% appropriate for us. But there's a gentleman, and his job was to talk people off of literally the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge. And he shares a story about a gentleman that was on the ledge, and he says that the statistics of the people that once they get onto the other side of actually surviving is very minimal, very low statistics. So he was sharing in this success story, and after an hour and a half of talking to the gentleman, he came back over the bridge and didn't end his life, which was the success. But when they talked about it later, he said, what was the difference? Trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And he said, you listened. For an hour and a half, you listened. That's all our kids need from us sometimes, is just to hear them out. We probably can't make sense of most of what they're talking about. It doesn't make any sense. I find myself asking my child if she can speak in whole sentences, because it's just like, and then like, and and then they like, and and no, I don't have a clue. What are you talking about? Any of you have that problem, or is it just in my house? Somebody, okay, good. I'm so glad. Take the time to listen without your device, without the TV on, without other distractions. We just have to do it. So we might be asking ourselves, where is God in all of this? Immobilized by a cognitive assassin, Satan. These kids are in the deepest throes of depression and anxiety, have a hard time believing that God values and creates people with a purpose. So our answer of just pray, God loves you, is true. God does love you. Yes, pray. But they're so broken, those answers are so hard for them to hear. Some people believe their unbearable pain or numbness is just a character flaw and can't be repaired. In some, their expectations and capabilities are irreconcilable. The symptoms get worse from the resulting frustration and embarrassment. Because of all of these factors, those with clinical depression and anxiety often and understandably struggle with their relationship with God, which then also contributes to a downward spiral. Right? It can also result in doubting God's goodness or that he even exists at all. These can cause the sufferer to look for answers and solutions in other places, in other promises, to find solace and comfort and healing, from something outside of God or God's system. However, the good news is, with good spiritual advice paired with good medical treatment, sufferers can find lasting psychological, spiritual, and emotional healing. So having the conversations with your pastor, with your medical professionals, giving good guidance and care to your children can help them be successful. Our kids may tell us they don't want us to talk to them about these things, but they are crying out for it. In this video, we're going to hear from a couple of teenagers that share that very thing.
Sometimes, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual,
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
or getting really mad,
Not able to sleep, or sleeping too much.
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late,
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed.
Not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself. It happens. More than you think. More than it should.
And people say, I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to
I
me.
wish he'd said
I
something.
wish I had said something.
When it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out, are you thinking about killing yourself?
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask. They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask, are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
that's crazy.
Don't be such a drama
You're
queen.
making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing yourself over. That's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself. What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad.
How can I help?
We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
a lot of people think about killing themselves. Adults and kids. Most of them never try it, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead. I can't live with this.
I'm gonna kill myself, take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure.
But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself.
Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
But don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts.
Make a list together. Write down 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet, so he always knows where to turn.
Be sure your home is safe. If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it out. Get it out of the house. The bullets, too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask. Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut, because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference. All the difference. In your kid's life.
The reality is that if we're not asking our children and we're not engaging in this conversation and they are experiencing this kind of pain, they will have the conversation with someone. So who is that someone that your child is going to reach out to? Is it on that list of people that you have, those 3 or 4 people? Or is it their friends? It brings us to a whole different dynamic, right? your child doesn't feel comfortable or safe to talk to you or a safe or trusted adult in your environment, and I would recommend creating a list of who is the safe and trusted adult. Don't mandate that your child say something to you if that's not it, and it's a better person, your sister, your sibling, somebody else, not their sibling, your grown-up. Somebody identify a trusted, safe adult for them to talk to. Who's next in line? Who do you guys think they're going to talk to? Their friends. Most children won't talk to their parent, won't talk to a trusted adult. They're going to talk to their friends. So your child may not be struggling with anxiety or depression or suicide or self-harm. You may find your child the hotline. So if you've not had this conversation with your child because you don't think that they need help, your child is going in blind, and they've now become the other child's hotline. I don't know about you, but that frightens me. My child is not equipped for that. That's not her job. What conversation do you have with your children when they receive information? How do we process that? I think that's as equally as important as understanding what's happening in the child that's suffering from depression. Most of our children today, I can say this is true of our middle school and most teenagers that I know, of many grown-ups, will keep a secret for someone because we value their relationship. I don't want someone to be disappointed in me. I don't want them to not feel like they can't trust me. So I'm going to keep the information to myself. What does your teenager do with the information that his or her friend wants to kill themselves? Have you had that conversation with your child? If you haven't, you should. Because these kids will talk to one another. What we recommend, obviously, is if your child, if you have this conversation, make sure that that child says, I need to tell my mom. Even if the child doesn't tell the friend that they're going to tell the mom, you need to tell your child, if someone tells you this, you have to tell me. It's not okay. It's not safe. You're not equipped. You're not the therapist. Okay? How bad will your child feel if that other child actually does commit suicide? That's a conversation I'm sure none of us want to have in their families, in our homes. And it means we have to stay engaged. You've got to look at their devices. You cannot just be their best friend. Some kids are really good at hiding some of these symptoms. We talked about the kid that only showed those symptoms in social media. Mom didn't ever see them at home. Some kids are looking for such approval from us that they're afraid to let us see their brokenness. Maybe they're carrying the weights of our problems on their shoulders, and they're afraid to tell us that this is impacting them. So they put on the perfect face. We may never see that. But if we're not having the conversation, we're not opening the dialogue, we never will. It just needs to be a routine part of our society today. What's going on? What are you concerned about? Maybe even the blatant question, wow, it's been a big thing in our society. There's topics everywhere. You're in high school, you're in middle school. Have you guys had any conversations about this? Have you ever considered this? Have you considered some of these things? If you don't have those conversations, you may find yourself.
This is Suicide Prevention Month, designed to raise awareness of an epidemic. Every 90 minutes, someone between the ages of 15 and 24 takes his or her life. The young woman you're about to meet tonight was 17. Her parents share Alexandra's story with Jim Axelrod in our continuing series, Eye on America.
Tonight was beautiful. I saw the moon, I saw the stars.
The home video will look so familiar to so many parents.
the sweet little girl, singing and dancing her way to her teen years, where she's recognized for achieving outside the home
Please consider me for the National Honor Society.
and thoroughly cherished inside.
Like, this was awesome, Alexandra. She was such a happy girl.
Happy birthday to you.
And so motivated and so just full of life.
Dear Alexandra.
But familiar will turn to terrifying when parents hear the whole story of Alexandra Valores. Just weeks after a family ski vacation,
Give a smile.
this 17-year-old high school junior, straight-A student, class officer, and robotics whiz
Not too bad.
made her bed, tidied her room, and walked to a highway overpass in Grafton, Massachusetts.
I leaned over the embankment and looked down and I saw her.
Dean Valores, Alexandra's father,
I was just hoping for warmth. Do you know what I mean? But there was no warmth that was done. Then all the cars kept driving by. My daughter's on the side of the road. Nobody saw this. And she's clothed.
Nearby, Dean and his wife Alicia found 2 journals in their daughter's belongings.
There was just so much joy in everything she did. And it doesn't match what was in that journal.
200 pages of self-loathing and despair.
You are broken.
You are a burden. You are lazy. You're a failure.
She was a highly motivated achiever.
But that's how she felt inside.
Such a sharp and confusing contrast to who they thought was their happy oldest child, strumming her way through adolescence and still talking to her parents.
You're having all these great conversations.
Great conversations. It just doesn't seem possible, but it's what reality was. Because it's written right.
With teen suicide at a 40-year high for young women Alexandra's age, and now the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds of both sexes, it is this disconnect that most haunts Dean and Alicia Valores. The girl who seemed to love him last November when her father took her to a concert went home and wrote, "I hated him. I hate myself for that."
The journal is a chronicle of deterioration. I think so.
I'd say so.
I think so.
Which is why they're taking this pain public that most keep private, headlining suicide prevention walks, giving in-depth interviews about their daughter's death.
The hurt, the sadness is evolving. And now there's this thing called living. So then I'm a good father, a good husband, and a good person.
They hope that in sharing the story of their daughter, maybe another family will be spared this trauma.
What will I miss by dying tonight? The possibility of getting better.
There's a lot of other kids out there that are like her, that are high achievers, that are balancing a lot. That's what makes her very relatable, and why maybe it's affecting people, and why they're listening is because I have a child like this too.
And in the pain of what Alex wrote to her parents in her final entry hours before she took her life, "Don't blame yourselves for not seeing warning signs," is also what the Valores family hopes to salvage from her death. Some meaning for others.
There's so many emails.
In June, the morning after an interview was published, they found this note on their doorstep.
What you have said in Alexandra's article truly changed my life. Knowing that families are talking to their kids about their mental health, it lets me know that she didn't die in vain. She's having such a huge impact. And that feels really good.
It's hard to talk about and process this story. Jim, I know that you and producer Wendy Cron spent months working on it. How is the family doing now? Well, it's been a little more than 6 months. So many levels of pain and devastation to process. I do think it's extremely important that we thank Dean and Alicia Valores for being so open with us and discussing their daughter's death. Those journal entries are brutal to read, but sharing them is their way of prodding other parents to check in with their kids even those, or especially those, who don't show those classic signs of being at risk. And they already have helped. For a list of resources on suicide prevention, we should mention you can go to our website tonight at cbsnews.com. We'll be right back.
That one's tough. So we may be asking ourselves, what are the ways that I can help our child, my child, or any child? The most important thing that we can do is effectively weigh the pros and cons of all treatment methods in partnership with your healthcare providers experienced in adolescent mental health and treatment. Talk to a doctor about what you're experiencing if you are experiencing any of these things. Taking a real proactive look. These are some pretty simple things. I got this from Access, which we can make available for you. To care for the physical needs of your child during this moment, yourself. 1 Kings, after a significant spiritual victory, Elijah collapsed under a tree and told God he was ready to die. God answered Elijah by first providing for his immediate, most basic needs, food, water, and rest. Renowned missionary Mother Teresa also focused first on her felt needs of people, knowing that each part of human wholeness, physical, mental, and emotional, were linked completely together. Even if a mental illness has damaged your child's physical health, poor eating habits, lack of sleep, poor hygiene, no motivation to exercise, encourage and even facilitate activity in their life. It's easy to say, get up and go do something. But what we need to do is do this with our child. Not tell them what to do, but do this with them. If we're struggling with some of these things, do these things ourselves with our children. And number 2 would be to pray for them and pray with them. People with mood disorders often cannot manage praying for themselves. Going back to that, where is God in this? Praying to a God they can't figure out. Pray with them. Although the Spirit will intercede for them in their inexpressible groanings, we know that from Romans 8:26 and 27, the intercession of the body will put words into the often inexplainable suffering and validate your teen. But do this with them. Encourage others that can protect your child with confidentiality, obviously. You want to pick the right people to be praying with you and with your child. Don't simply give them the instruction, pray and it will all get better. This is something we have to do. This is our action. Encourage or insist them in accurately assessing the issues. Once you've developed an open relationship with them and they can start telling you what the problems are, you can help them accurately assess what's in front of them so they're not living in their great fear and that great anxiety moment that's unreasonable. You can help them with that. Assure them of God's truth. People with mood disorders often forget what joy feels like. You ever had that season where you've just been sad for so long, you've lost a loved one? You forget what joy feels like. So we need to remind them and assure them of God's truth. The gospel is something that's already done, not something that we have to do yet, right? So we can show them that great joy that God wants for us. We need to be vulnerable to our children. We need to share with them that this is hard, this is difficult. We can't paint this as the perfect rosy family, perfect picture, sweep it under the carpet. We have to be willing to be vulnerable with our children. We need to give them specific steps. We need to have, again, dialogue. What specifically causes you to struggle? How can we take steps to help you move through that? You can do that with a professional. Minister to the caregivers. That's yourselves, mom and dad. Take care of yourselves. Put on your air mask. Okay, this is going to be a bumpy ride. You need to do that. Take care of you as well. Be patient. This doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't get better quickly. It takes persistence and patience. So be patient on that journey. Refer critical situations, obviously, to an emergency medical care situation. If you feel like your child is in danger, we heard these teenagers say it, Call 911. Go to the emergency room. Do not wait and think that they're going to sleep this one out. If your child is expressing a desire to hurt themselves, do something. Right? It's not normal. It's not natural. It's not an okay experience for them. We talked a little bit about what they're experiencing being so different. I don't know about any of you, but when I was growing up, this was not a conversation in our household. I don't know how my parents would have dealt with it then, so we don't have a roadmap either. So be a community that talks about this. Be a community that loves each other through it. If one of your peers, one of your friends is struggling, be that light, that beacon. Be the hands and feet of Jesus for each other. Okay? I do want to leave you with a final word of encouragement. Okay? That Christ himself, although well known for miraculous healings with just a word or a touch, employed a variety of techniques similar to treatment, regimens, medicine, talk therapy, and other common methods of mental health care. Of course, he could have healed any way he pleased. But just like he taught us, his example shows how grace and individualized care leads to the wholeness he wants for all of us. We're reminded in John 10 that the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and to live it to the full, or live it to abundance. When mood disorders like depression, anxiety, and other serious mental illnesses become manageable in a Christian who has long suffered, it is experienced as a holy deliverance from the very personal sort of pain that they've experienced. It activates a spiritual light that burns bright and won't be extinguished by the failings of the fallen world. Their agony melts into a symphony of life inside people who were once desperate just to blink out a few notes of it. An author, Pastor John Orberg, says in his book, The Life You've Always Wanted, often it is the people closest to suffering who have the most powerful joy. We say this a lot to adults, but God is building our testimonies for him. When we face these difficult challenges through and in him and overcome, it is his glory. And our children have testimonies of faith. So there is a hope. With your help, your well-executed treatment plans, your struggling child can uncover an incredible joy buried underneath the very real, very dangerous illnesses that face them and reach the abundant life promised by Christ. It is desperately needed, easier than you think, and so worth it. That's a lot. It's usually at this time that we kind of ask if you have any questions, if there's anything that I can do to be helpful here. Where are you guys at? Just, yeah. Yeah, great question. The question was, do we have a list of Christian counselors or counselors in the area for teen mental illness? Is that it? We don't have an exhaustive list at this point. We're happy to work with others to develop one. Different insurances, different things cause it to be a little bit more difficult. I don't have an exhaustive list, but I'd be happy to work on one. Yeah. As a school, it's difficult for us to recommend anyone in particular. We need to import that, but it's difficult. We need to make sure that we're maintaining those balances. The first place that I would go to is your church, your local church, and see if they have any counselors that they would recommend. We could be working on a list from others as well. But I don't happen to have one for you tonight.
Just to state real quickly about that, even though we don't have a specific list, if you look online, there are a number of Christian counseling services. And the reason why I specifically say Christian, some of you, if you have health care, there's some kind of psychological and emotional services that are available through healthcare. That counselor may or may not be a Christian, may or may not be allowed to bring that into their practice, depending upon who it is that they're working for. But there are some specific Christian counseling services that certainly this would be an area that they would help to treat. And if you go online and you search that in the Southern California area, you should be able to find a number of resources there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you've done your research, but as far as like a staff training, is there certain staff that are equipped, certain trainings that you guys have taken to kind of be on the lookout a little bit, or certain things that might happen in the school?
Yeah, great question. So what professional development have we taken? Different teachers in different classes, a lot of us in middle school have taken some professional development classes specifically in this area. I've taken several, several, and many of them directly are connected to suicide.
And then do you kind of
stuff? And then we talk to the staff, and as the children, if there's something that somebody is expressing a concern, it's usually brought to admin. We tend to meet with the parents, the student, and then with the parents as that kind of comes up.
There are some locally that offer free training for staff, and they actually come to your school to equip your staff with certain, certificates or things like that.
Yeah, that's great. We do have some of that with our ACSI professional development, and many of the teachers do that, but that's certainly another great option that we can take a look at. There's never too much training in this area, for sure. It is constantly evolving and changing as children change and evolve and their concerns change.
I think also to speak to that, and I appreciate that comment, there are a number of pastors on staff, or for those of us who've gone through seminary where we had to go through that kind of training, where we have that kind of pastoral training. But for most of us, it's short of the clinical training. So that point where pastoral intervention can come to a particular place. But then at that point, especially where you realize this is more of a clinical issue, then to be able to hand that off. But the idea of being able to identify those things is crucial.
No more? Yeah. I really wish there was a way to boost this up and say this is a really great thing. But I think that sitting in some of the solemnness of it all is not a bad idea. This is a big problem in our community. Every community is impacted. Every child is subjected to either some level of anxiety or depression of their own, or being the friend of somebody. I think that's just as much of a big deal for those conversations at home as well. Because your child may not be struggling, and certainly I'm not here to say that every child struggles from this, but every child is impacted because others are struggling with depression and anxiety. And that's true across the world. There's no child not impacted to some degree. I'm really looking forward to our next Parent Student Safety Night, where we talk about something really uplifting and fantastic. But part of the purpose of this is to, again, without our children present, be able to have an open dialogue, present some data and information to some stuff that we know about, so that you guys can go out and have it on your radar and apply it as is appropriate in your own households and homes. Not for us to judge or to provide diagnosis of any nature at all, but simply just to make some of this information available to you. Yes?
This training on who is wondering about your own child, Focus on the Family also has the one-time counseling availability to call, and it's about 20 minutes, and you can just call the counseling service and reflect to them what you see in your child, or something that's of concern, and they can kind of reflect back to you. It was really helpful, and they do actually have a list of counselors. It's not very big.
Let me just recap real quick for our friends that are online. Focus on the Family has a system where you can call in for a counseling session, a brief mini 20-minute counseling appointment where you book one time, right, and share any of your concerns or things that you might be seeing in your child or in someone else that you're concerned with. They can also provide you with additional resources to help get you some additional counseling pending or following that session.
Resources or insurance, you can also call our insurance actually filtered for any Christian counselors in the area.
So some insurances will filter and give you Christian counselor specific. I happen to have Kaiser. That is not something that they are able to do. They do have an incredible mental health department. You can get an appointment immediately. They will get your child or you in immediately. They have a great system for that. They won't provide specific Christian counseling. One thing that I've heard many people share is that while they can't advertise that they're Christians, you feel it when you walk in the room. So that's the beauty of even going with your health insurance, is that you may end up with a Christian counselor. You can always, another thing that you can do is get your pastoral counseling from your church or your local ministry setting, your small group, a pastor that you're connected to. That's where you get your spiritual counseling and get some of the clinical counseling from the clinician that's available for your insurance. Don't let the fact that it's not a Christian counselor prevent you from getting care for your child. There are Christians available that we can get you. If we want to talk about that, I've got a list of people that will help you navigate the spiritual aspect of this disorder or illness. Don't not get clinical care for your child. Also, any emergency room will see your child. So that is that you just walk in, my child is having suicidal thoughts or statements, they 100% are legally obligated to take that child at that time and at least assess them and give you care. Thank you very much.
I have an observation. It's not necessarily uplifting, but 10, 15 years ago, working in the medical community, they didn't want to diagnose anyone with anything under 16, 17, 18. So we're learning, right?
Right.
The numbers, tracking the numbers.
Let me catch our friends up here. 15 years ago or so, we weren't so quick to diagnose or even acknowledge mental health issues in the hospital. We're seeing a different trend in that.
Yeah, so now even capturing that it's the second year of death, the numbers going down to 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I think we were in the 9 or 15 years ago. You had to really fight to get a doctor to say, yeah, there's a disorder here. They would want to leave it until they were 16, 17, 18. They say the brain wasn't developed, and sometimes that's too late.
Yeah.
Being able to get intervention earlier.
I think that actually is uplifting, that we have evolved, that we are using some of the things in front of us and available to us to diagnose and acknowledge some of this in our younger children, giving them a much better opportunity for strategies and success while they're still formidable, before they've developed an idea that there is absolutely no hope. We all kind of feel that from day to day. But I think that what we're seeing, having these kinds of conversations, being willing to sit together just in the ugliness and the discomfort of it, I think is critical, that we're willing to do it. We really value that you guys come out and listen to us and for your ideas, and we really appreciate and thank you for continuing to feed us ideas to talk about. This is the last one that we're going to do this year. But if there's topics or something that you want us to take a look at for the coming year, we would love to explore that. I would also love to get other people up here talking to you. In this particular case, we wanted to be very cautious not to have a clinician diagnosing. So it was research-based. These are statistics. We're not diagnosing your children, not giving that kind of information out. We want to be real careful. I guess if we don't have anything else, we're right on the buttons. Miss Linda,
So, yeah, that was a heavy evening, but so incredibly important. And thank you, Dr. Nichols, for providing this platform
and Mrs. Jedlick for your research and your heart and your spiritual gifts of teaching and delivering. That's so important. I think we all learned something tonight. So let me pray for us, and then I'll release you. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you never change, even when everything around us is changing and unpredictable. Help us to draw near to our children and to nurture an environment of open communication so that they may know that we are for them and not against them, Lord. Lord, thank you that you sent your Son that we may have life, that we may have it more abundantly as you wish for us to do, abounding in the fullness of joy and strength for mind, for body, and soul. Let us put our hope in you, Father. Thank you for all that we have learned this evening. We love you and we give you glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all for coming.